big deal. So.
Well, this is mine.
Make a big deal of this whole security.
Okay.
That's easy.
Maybe you could just give us some kind of idea of your relationship to this action and to the trial in general.
Well, I think what we're doing in there is trying to not only deal with the question of what we did, but what GE is doing it, and the fact that they're involved in the production of nuclear warheads, to which even a tool maker, a tool designer in there, tried to say on the witness stand that he didn't know what the material was to be used for. What we're trying to do is to bring the reality of what that material is being used for. The fact that those nose cones, which will appear in court this afternoon, are capable of an explosion of 335 kilotons, something like 25 or 30 Hiroshimas in each one of those crates that it's sitting in the front of the courtroom. So what we're trying to do, I think, particularly in cross-examination, is trying to get some indication of exactly what that whole plant is all about, and exactly how secrecy operates in this regard. That it's not there to really provide security, but to I think befuddle the public and provide little information even to the employees themselves. It's on a need-to-know basis, and each one has a very sealed-off idea according to their job of what is going on. The whole attitude is not to ask questions or to question one another about what the work is that is going on there. The whole purpose, and I think the idea of asking about the appearance of the building related to that. The fact that the front of the building looks like an ordinary office building, the back of the building looks like an ordinary manufacturing site. There's absolutely no indication that genocide is being prepared in that place.
Something about your own personal experience in terms of the action that you took and how you're experiencing things on a day-to-day basis.
Well, my own personal experience of taking part in that action was a direct response to what I was learning as director of a peace center in Pittsburgh, the Thomas Merton Center, and learning that weapons like the Mark 12A were being produced for first strike purposes in order to be used in an aggressive manner in a violation of all international law, all our international attempts to limit the effects of warfare. And that as a result of the types of weaponry and the attitude towards the weaponry in terms of national policy, that we're reaching the stage where we're really, truly getting closer and closer to the brink of nuclear war in a way in the 80s that is far more dangerous than it was even back in the Cuban Missile Crisis times. Leaders today are talking about and planning for and developing strategies for limited nuclear war, which we say is an absurdity. There's no such thing as a limited nuclear war. There's no guarantee that any war using nuclear weapons wouldn't quickly escalate into all-out war. So, taking that information and the fact that I have 6 children, and the fact that I was seeing more and more clearly that their lives were being immediately threatened by this whole policy, which is really not widely known to the American public, which the absolute totality of the threat is not widely understood at all. And so it became more and more clear to me that there was a need to bring it to wide attention, to resist with one's life if that was necessary in order to protect all life.
This actually, it appears to me to be a somewhat extraordinary action, but I was wondering if you feel it's extraordinary.
Well, I think we've characterized it or heard it characterized as the first act of disarmament in 35 years. In 35 years of negotiations between the Soviet Union and the United States, there's not been one weapon destroyed as a result of those negotiations. So I think it is extraordinary in the sense that never before has anyone actually stopped and made useless the production of nuclear weapons. So in that sense, it is, I think, a first step.
My impression of you, Molly, is that you're not particularly criminal type. I was wondering if you could...
I didn't hear your question.
I'd say my impression is that you're not particularly a criminal type, and I was wondering if you could give us some idea of whether you feel that you are a criminal or not.
Well, I think the question of our criminality in this case has to do with a number of factors. Motivation, intent, as the law puts it, and I think our intent was to prevent far greater criminality. And that gets to the legal law, the legal requirement under Pennsylvania law of justification. In other words, you're acting in order to prevent a far greater crime from happening. You're justified, and we would say not only justified, but in this case required by conscience to act. And then there's the other legal question of the responsibility of individual citizens under the Nuremberg standards, which our own government placed upon all citizens of the world after World War II, saying that if you knew what was going on in the Nazi death camps, if you had some participation in that, you had a moral responsibility, despite what German law said, despite what the German government, German courts said, you had a moral responsibility to act to stop that. Do not go along, do not simply obey orders. And so when you look at these weapons, which are in every case a violation of every attempted international treaty to limit the scope and the effects of warfare, it's absolutely clear that there's a moral responsibility on citizens who know and understand what the effect of these weapons is, and the fact that they are first strike weapons places a burden of responsibility on all of us, I think, to act, to stop it.
Do you think there's any analogy between the testimony of the GE employee this morning who stated that he did not know what the material, what the cone was to be used for, relates in any way to the Germans who say they didn't know about the concentration camps?
I don't want to talk to that man's individual moral responsibility, but clearly there are echoes in all that kind of attitude of the German citizens, the good citizens who did not know, perhaps because they didn't want to know, perhaps because they refused to look at it, perhaps because they quietly believed that killing people was within the rights of the German government. Nevertheless, the responsibility was there.
Do you think that the court is actually going to be able to hear the justification argument that you've brought up in terms of Nuremberg and the whole German situation? Are they going to be able to listen?
Well, I hope in my opening statement to deal with the fact that it's a very difficult situation for the jurors, both to hear and make decisions in this regard, when the fact is that every court in the land has refused to deal with this question, and the law has not caught up with the reality in this case. And we want to call the jurors to their responsibility as the conscience of the community, and say that the jurors have their responsibility in this regard to deal with the question of justification, the question of international law. And we want to put people on the stand who will clearly connect all this up, both as to our intent, as to the immediacy and the reality of the nuclear threat, and then to, the moral responsibility under Nuremberg and international law standards. So if we're allowed to put that case on, I think we have an argument. That'll be up to the judge how far we get with it.
Of course, the problem with that, though, is that when you speak of the conscience of the conscience of the community may simply not be what you would like it to be. We spoke with two workers this morning, just 2 blocks from the courthouse, who neither knew about the trial, of its existence. One came from Pittsburgh, one came from Philadelphia. They knew nothing about the problem of nuclear weapons.
I think informed conscience is maybe the key idea. And the problem with this whole national security mentality is that conscience has not been informed. What we hope to do in this trial is to insist that people, get a much more clear and better developed idea of the risks of building those weapons, of the fact that the very building of those weapons is increasing the likelihood of nuclear war and not providing security. We want to explode the myth of national security for what it is, an outright lie. And thus inform as many people as we're able to, in as wide a variety of ways as we can, as to the reality of this, so that they may have an informed conscience. And we hope, in terms of the jurors, that their conscience, having heard the testimony of the expert witnesses, of the bishops and other moral leaders that are here to testify as character witnesses, that their conscience might then become informed so that they can respond in a knowledgeable and real way to this question.
You're being very courageous, I think, in a very difficult situation. And I'm wondering if you have any fear and if you're scared in terms of a possible jail sentence, and if you could tell us about those kind of feelings.
Well, I spent 11 weeks in jail in 5 different county jails, so I have a very clear idea of what jail is like, and it's going to be hard to go back to that scene. It's not something one does in terms of looking forward to that kind of a situation, but I'm much more scared about the reality of the fact that my children's lives are at stake here, the fact that I have no hope from the current situation that my grandchild, who's due in June, has a chance of living to grow up in a world like this unless we stop this arms race. So for me, that's the overriding consideration, and it makes it far easier to deal with the question of jail, because I'm balancing against the very, very real threat that we all face, and particularly my children and potential grandchildren.
Is there anything that you could say to the rest of the mothers of the world?
I think we're the only ones that are going to turn it around. I think we're the only ones that can understand and protect life at this point in this macho patriarchal society.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Molly. I'm Michael Diamond.